Invite our next speaker, Montserrat Pareja Eastway. She's from the University of Barcelona, as everybody here knows, and she's going to give her contribution on policies and approaches to renewing Europe's housing. Montserrat.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm happy that everybody knows that I am not from Tarragona, but from Barcelona. That's good. Well, I'm happy to be here, particularly because as good friends, Chris and Richard, they said, well, we will do the problems and you do the solutions. And, you know, solutions are always much more difficult, I think. Before starting, they know that I was quite concerned at the very beginning, in trying to shape what I wanted to say, apart from being at that time in the afternoon of a Saturday, because I really wanted to point out what was new, let's say, after these 10 years or 15 years since the first book was published. And, well, talking to a friend, another one, she said, well, it doesn't matter if it's new or not. Sometimes you have to repeat it again and again. So what I want to talk today will be based on mainly 3 pillars. One would be talk about policy. And as we went through the different chapters, we realized that we were analyzing different approaches to the problems. I will talk about what kind of approaches have been used and have been more successful than others. And I will say a few words as well about the process. I think that something that will be said in our discussion as well is what's next. I think that we are all concerned about the amount of knowledge that we have accumulated and what are we going to do with this amount of knowledge in terms of renewing, rehabilitating, or regenerating the housing stock or the neighborhood. So, a few words to introduce the topic, although, as Chris said, I think that the title of the conference goes from overcoming the crisis and focusing on the built environment. And I think that all our chapters stressed the idea that the built environment was something to look at, rather than going further to the new developments or looking at new brownfields to increase our building rate. Why is the built environment important? It's not only important for a question of cultural identity, but it's also important in terms of what do we have to offer in terms of social housing. I mean, not in terms of new social housing, but how to regenerate the existing stock to promote more social housing, identity preservation, the improvement of social cohesion. All the built environment is contributing to this kind of issues. And I think that one of the newest things is that nowadays we are looking much more to the idea of sustainability. I've been coordinating the working group on housing and urban sustainability for a long time now. And I think that sustainability has become a common transversal issue in many, many workshops, particularly those that are dealing with regeneration and the built environment. So, despite the confusing labels, I agree that I felt deleted in the sense of use renewal rather than whatever you were using before in your chapter. I think that we have to take into account that when we are looking at improving housing, we are also looking at improving the neighborhood and the living conditions of the community, individual, community, housing, neighborhood, and city. So if we are talking in a broad sense about improving the living conditions, we have to look not only at physical conditions, but also to social aspects at the neighborhood. So what do we have to deal with this problem? In short, I think that we could classify into 2 different policies what could be done with the built environment or the housing stock. Targeted policies looking at partial interventions in the neighborhood, looking for short-term results. I remember that the catalyzer for regeneration in Catalonia was the suicide of somebody which couldn't deal with the housing conditions. Demolition and public or collective spaces. So this has been done. This has been used, sometimes reused as a strategy to improve the built environment. And in general, this kind of targeted policies were considering social intervention as a side program. That was not one of the main pillars of the intervention. However, there are some other policies which are much more comprehensive, much more holistic in the approach to the intervention. They are called integral interventions, looking for long-term results, which sometimes are critical in the sense of convincing policymakers or those that are responsible for the intervention that it's good to wait for a little while, although the amount, of course, will be higher at the very beginning. So these kind of holistic approaches then include social programs as a main pillar in the regeneration. I wrote the chapter on Catalonia, and I wrote the chapter on the Lleida Barris, and one of the most important examples was a kind of recipe book done by all the immigrant women living in a neighborhood which was absolutely segregated, and they just invested in that kind of intervention, and that was called Housing Renewal Program. So these policies that have been used in the different chapters and different Europe, in fact, I think that are looking at sustainability. Let's say that every time a little bit more. Looking at the first time to these three main pillars of sustainability, economic, environmental, and social, but nowadays including this transversal perspective, which is the cultural sustainability. So it was clear after looking at all the chapters that holistic approaches were the ones who were much more successful. So if we can imagine, because I'm trying to generalize from the experience, what could be an ideal process integrating this holistic approach, I think that we could start by saying that on the basis of a strong political will, it doesn't matter if the political will comes from the claims of the citizens or because the electoral program said that they had to do whatever if they were elected. The process starts by identifying who is or who can be involved in the process of regeneration. And I think that this is one of the key points in the process towards regeneration. Once we know who can be involved or who want to be involved in the process, and taking into account that we are looking mainly to an area-based approach, the process continues by elaborating a kind of diagnosis. What do we have? Which are our problems? Which are our emergencies? I think that one of the important things is this diagnosis should be agreed by all the actors, because then it's clear and it's easy to identify which are the priorities. And once the priorities are defined, it's very clear to start. And at least in theory, you are avoiding potential conflicts in the future. So the diagnostics and the priorities should be transformed into a plan of action. What are we going to do first, and then next, and then next? In terms of a very easy thing to understand, when you are dealing with a renewal program or regeneration program, it's important that all actors know which is the centralized identity, which is the responsible of the process. All the actors should be visible in one only central entity. So once we know which is the plan of action, I think that the next step is the identification of the resources and the commitment of those actors that want to be involved. And when we are talking about resources, mainly nowadays, we are not talking only about money. We are also talking about time, about capacity to disseminate, about involvement in the sense of what am I going to earn from being involved? Like, well, okay, I will have some space to build, I don't know, a parking space. No? So it's clear that the resources should be, it's a clear contribution, and people, in order to be involved, need to know what are they going to earn from being involved. And so the creation of partnerships, public-private partnerships, were or are in our chapters one of the key issues. But I wanted to say now, okay, PPP, no, the private-public partnership, what happens when one of the P's starts being a little bit weak? A wobbly pillar would be the public one, no? So do we now deal with only private-private partnerships? So if we want to evaluate the process, there are some strengths, as usual, and weaknesses. I think that in many cases we identify a clear leadership. It doesn't matter if it is the local council or it's the citizens association or whatever, but it's important that there is somebody which is assuming the leadership role. The holistic approach, as I said before, so integrating the physical intervention and the social intervention, from urban planning to transport, from social programs to renewing the facade of the dwellings, I think that this was one of the clear strengths in all the approaches. Dissemination before and after the intervention. I think that this is one of the clear things. Citizens, neighbors need to know what's going on in the neighborhood. And also the transferability issue. We should learn from other experiences, and it was clear that transferability played a role in some cases. For instance, the Llei de Barris in Catalonia has been transferred to Chile, and I think that the experience could also be transferred. So also, and to end with this kind of strength, I think that establishing links between the renewed area and the area that has not been renewed, but it's also part of the neighborhood or the city, it's also important. I don't know, an example could be to build up a theater in the renewed area which could be used for the whole community. Weaknesses. Money is always a weakness. And I think that sometimes it's not only the deficiency but the inadequacy of local funding. Let me put an example. One way of renewing the city in many cases in Spain was to build a swimming pool or a library. And nowadays the problem is that these issues cannot be maintained after the austerity period. So anyway, that was an example. The lack of skills or efficiency in the execution and the management of the process. Sometimes the unbelievable but true, I mean, the excessive bureaucracy can stop the process that could lead to a nice regeneration. Again, superficial interventions, the makeup might be also a weak point in renewing the built environment. And again, and this was clear in our French chapter, the risk of or missing neighborhood identity. So what have we learned? Somebody will find this familiar, I think. So despite the differences of the countries, I think that there were lessons to be learned from the comparison. And of course, being a member of the European Network of Housing Research, I think that we have to support the idea of comparison and transferability of research and experiences. I think that taking into account the consideration of the uniqueness of the space of the neighborhood, the particularities, let's say the path dependency of the neighborhood in order to properly rehabilitate, it's fundamental. Why? Because we cannot apply recipes. We can learn from experiences, we can learn from transferability, but we cannot apply recipes. Again, tenure, which is, I think, one of the key differences in the different chapters, played a role. Tenure played a role in involvement of the actors, in the commitment of the actors, and also in designing policy intervention. This is a fact that should be taken into account. Again, and I think that our chapters look at more or less the end of the 2010, 2011 in some cases. I think that after the crisis, rehabilitation policies, regeneration policies, and looking at the built environment are important, but I think that we should profit from the moment we are living in order to promote a sustainable way of looking at regeneration. I mean, we are now able to do properly things. So finally, and I really want to be a little provocative on that, I think that we cannot assume that austerity will end soon. I think that we need clear incentives to rehabilitation, and I think that rehabilitation should be profitable. We cannot just think that things are going to change, because they probably won't change soon. So we need to change our vision in order to make rehabilitation profitable. So in short, I'm going to conclude right now. I was wondering, when resources from the public sector are scarce, when the need to integrate the built environment, not only because of our conference, but because of our experience, in the design of the future neighborhood city pathways is determinant, and when we have learned a lot about how to do things in regeneration or in renewal, I was wondering, well, what can be done? The context has changed, we have the experience, what can be done? So I conclude with a question. I am not sure if you are very happy about that, but I want discussion. So thank you very much. I think that it's